Paducah? You know Paducah, don't you? Hmm.
Football fan.
Oh, I don't know him. Okay. I visited. Brother James, you open us a word prayer, sir. Amen. Did you push the button already?
Yeah, we're ready to go.
Well, it was the slowest one I could find, but he was too fast for it, too. Good morning. We're in Numbers, all right? Chapter 14, we left off. Does anybody even remember where we're at on this? Say again? Verse 20, that's right. But I was kind of more or less talking about what had happened, you know. I mean, Moses, he had sent out what? 12 spies, right? And they were to go into the land of Canaan. Now, their mission was to search out the land and the people and then bring back their report. Now, usually when I was ever sent out to do something like that, you know, I wasn't to come back and give my opinion. I was just supposed to state that of the fact of what I had found. Big difference there, right? Now, the land, they would see, find out if it's good and fertile, all right? Could it support the flocks and their herds? Were the people strong, weak? How many was there, all right? Now, these spies were just to go out and gather information and bring their report back to the people. Pretty simple job, right? Now, my question here, all right, is when did it become decision time? You with me? Okay, I mean, you know, the children of Israel should have already made up their minds. It shouldn't be a question of now, do we or don't we, right? I mean, that should have been decided back when Moses first came to the land of Egypt there. And when Moses came to the people and told them, you know, I am has sent me to you. You know, he is going to deliver you from the hands of the Egyptians. Now, this is when the children of Israel should have made their decision, right? This is when they should have told Moses, no, we are good, you know. We are content here as slaves. We have no desire to leave and go out into the wilderness chasing some old story that was promised to our fathers before us. I mean, hadn't the children of Israel already promised to follow their God? Hadn't the people said, all that the Lord has said, we will do? Were not they to be his people, and he was to be their God? But every time things get just a little tough, right? The people have murmured and they've complained. You know, I was telling Larry, they done run out of verbs to describe, you know, what they've done, right? They've whined, complained, they've murmured, they've chode, they've done all this, all right? And now they've rebelled. They want to elect new leaders that will lead them back to the land of Egypt, right? In other words, they fear these people that they have never even met. They don't know what they can do, right? They fear man more than they fear their God. And they know what he can do, right? And God once again is ready to destroy them all and start over with Moses, make of him a mighty nation that will serve him as their God. But what did Moses do? And how many times was this? That was the second time, wasn't it? He interceded on the behalf of the children of Israel, and Moses knows God. God could kill them all just as like he was killing that of one man, right? Poof, poof, right? Now, Moses besieges God. He pleads to God to let his mercy be greater than their iniquities. Now, I am glad that God's grace and mercy is always better than man's sin, right? But Moses wants to pardon them once again, just as he has been doing from the time they left Egypt even up into now. Huh? Moses has asked God to spare his children, and God here gives his answer to Moses. Here we're going to be in Numbers chapter 14 and verses 20 and 22. I'm going to have to get rid of this jacket. Is that all right? Will that be acceptable? My jacket. Is that? Okay. I got a white shirt on, so that's more better, right? Okay, I'm good. All right. That's more better. So there in Numbers chapter 14, let's look in verses 20 and 22, all right? And the Lord said, I have pardoned according to thy word, but as truly as I live, all the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord. Because all those men which have seen my glory and my miracles, which I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, have now tempted me these 10 times and have not hearkened unto my voice. Okay? Now God pardoned, right? He pardoned the children of Israel just as Moses had petitioned of God. But it didn't take away their guilt, did it? All right? And there will be consequences that must be faced here. Now we know God to be the one and only true God, right? He's God creator, right? He's God the I am, right? He's the God Almighty, right? He is sovereign. That means he is the ruler. He is in control. He takes care of everything, and he has power over everything. Even nature itself has to obey God. Okay? And all things are to be as God wills, even these people. Now, God, if you read that when they're in there, God's down to calling his people, he calls them those men here, right? Huh? God's not claiming their ownership or even giving it to Moses at this time, is he? They had seen God's glory. They had been eyewitnesses to the miracles, and they had received the goodness from him, but still it says they tempted their God. And God states that they have tempted me now these 10 times. Has it really been 10 times? God ain't lying, right? Now, how many we remember that? What was the first one? The crossing of the Red Sea back there in Exodus 14. All right, you had the Red Sea on one side, and you had them 600 chosen chariots on the other. And the children of Israel, they said it had been better for them to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. All right, but what did God do? He led them through on dry ground with water on the left and water on. Could you imagine walking through there? It'd be like going to one of them aquariums, right? Fish and everything, floating around there and everything. Huh? Can you remember another one? Exodus 15, they have the waters of Mari, right? The bitter waters. Brother Stewart mentioned there what happened then, all right? They chose, they made that complaint about what shall we drink? And what did God do? He fixed it. How did he fix it? He threw a tree in there that made the water sweet, didn't he? Exodus 16 for the third time in the wilderness of sin. That's before they even reached Mount Sinai, wasn't it? The whole congregation murmured, "Would to God that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt." They murmured because they had no food to eat, and God did what? He rained down that bread from heaven, right? He gave them the manna to eat. They was happy to get it then, right? And also there in Exodus 16 is the manna. Now it came with stipulations, right? Huh? God commanded, "Gather of it every man according to his eating, an omer for every man." Now you want to chase a rabbit here? This is what I was thinking when Brother Stewart was talking about Ruth and how much she had gone into Boaz, and gleaned the fields, right? Now, omer is how much, Larry? 2.08 quarts, remember? You're supposed to say, "Yes, Grady, that's right." I was testing you, right? But 2.08 quarts, right, was the omer. And that was the gathering of what a man could eat, right? Now, an ephod is what Ruth had gleaned, right? Now, if you take the barley that they were gathering at that time, and you take the manna, and you figure they was kind of about even, according to the man's eating, and it being like a one-day gathering there and everything. And she gathered an ephod, all right, which is like a tenth. All right? Omer is a tenth part of an ephod. So she gathered what you would consider probably enough for 10 days of food. Huh? If we use those 2 points in the Bible as a reference. In other words, she had enough to feed her and Naomi for that day, the next day, all right? And then she had enough left over to sell. That's why Naomi was so surprised as, "Where did you eat all that stuff from," right? That would have been quite a bit of food when you ain't got nothing to eat. So anyway, that's what I was thinking at that time when he was talking about it, so I don't know what else he said at the time, all right? Now, but they had the manna to eat, right? God gave it to them, all right? And we talked about the stipulations there and everything. Now they were only supposed to gather for that day, because if they gathered more, what happened? It grew the worms in it, right? And it stank, all right? Exodus 16, at the same time, the people, that wasn't good enough that they had the manna. They murmured for the flesh to eat, so God provided them, all right, with the manna in the morning and the quail in the evening, right? Now, for the 6th time, the people still in disobedience to God, so God commanded 6 days, all right, so you gather, but on the 7th day, which would be the Sabbath, Saturday, all right, it was there should be no work to done. But the people, what'd they do? There were still some of them that went out to gather the manna, huh? So God told them, says, okay, you just stay in your tents all day Saturday. He grounded them, didn't he? Exodus 17, in the wilderness of sin, still on their way to Mount Sinai. They're at Rephidim, all right? This time the people chose, all right? Give us water that we may drink. Now Moses did as God commanded. He struck the rock there, all right, with his staff, and out came the water for all them, the herds and the flocks and everything. Now for the 8th time, we look in Exodus chapter 32. They're finally there in Mount Sinai. And Moses, he went up to the mountain to meet with God, right? Now Moses was gone so long, the people said, we wot not what has become of him, right? So the people, they made that what? They made that idol, right? That molten calf. And they said, these be thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt, right? I got a word to describe that, but you know, I don't want to call people stupid, okay? But people failed to wait on Moses, all right? They've been only gone 40 days and 40 nights, right? They failed to wait on Moses, but most important of all, they failed to wait on their Lord. For the 9th time, we look at Numbers 11. The people complain, all right? And we're not even told what about this time. But God heard it, it pleased the Lord, and he consumed them with the fire in the uttermost parts of the camps, right? Now they called that place Taberah, which means burning. Y'all remember all these as I bring them up? Because if you don't, I need to start all over again, okay? Numbers 11. Now, this is the 10th time, all right? It said they loathed the manna, all right? They were really glad to get it the first time, but it's been about a year they've been eating on it, and now they hated that of what God had given them. It's a good thing that we don't do that nowadays, right? But we do take for granted everything that God has given us, right? It said they lusted and said, who shall give us flesh to eat, right? Hadn't God provided the first time? And again, God sent the quail to eat, enough for a whole month. And while it was in their teeth, while they were chewing it, God sent that plague against them, and people, they started dying, didn't they? And the people, they named the place of this Kiriath Hadavan, all right? It says the graves of lust, for they buried the people that had lusted there. I mean, that's 10 times. The children of Israel, they murmured, they whined, they complained, and they stood in defiance to their God. And now, when they're ready to receive the promise that God had given to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, ready to possess that land that flows with the milk and honey, the people say, no, God, we can't do this. The people there, they're just too big, they're too strong, they're too much for our God to conquer. God said he was going to take care of it, right? But they didn't trust it in the Lord to do what he said he would do. They say we had been better off of dying in Egypt, or we have died in the wilderness, all right, than being where we are now. They have not hearkened to the voice of their Lord, and God has had enough of these stiff-necked people, and now the consequences are to come. So let's look at verses 23 to 25. Now this is God talking. He says, surely they shall not see the land which I swear unto their fathers, neither shall any of them provoke me see it. But my servant Caleb, because he had another spirit with him, and hath followed me fully, him and I will bring unto the land thereunto he went, and his seed shall possess it. Now the Amalekites, or Amalekites, however you want to look at it, all right, and the Canaanites dwell in the valley. Okay? In other words, they were right then, right there, right? He said, tomorrow, God's telling them, tomorrow turn you and get you into the wilderness by the way of the Red Sea. Now God has sworn unto their fathers. In other words, God had promised their descendants will inherit the land, but it just won't be these people, right? So this is why we are not getting out the wilderness yet. They had provoked their God. They had tempted their God. They had caused him to anger, and they had made themselves for their God to be their judge. And God, he pronounced the sentence, right? They are not to cross over into the land. They are not even going to see the land. Now we know that Caleb and Joseph, or Joshua, these are the only two of the generations that's going to be allowed. Except for Moses. He'll finally make it there many, 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 many hundred years later, right? They acted in a much different manner than the people Caleb and Joshua did, right? They knew if God was with them, that no one could stand against them. You know, we still have that same promise. They had a trust, they had a faith in their God that the others had lacked, right? God has told them that they were not to go into the land now, that they were not to proceed going farther anymore. The people there in the wilderness of Paran, just miles away from the land of Canaan, all right? But at this time, there were also the other people, right? There are people that I would understand that they knew that the children of Israel was coming, right? Now people that had already made ready, they prepared for their arrival. That says the Amalekites, all right, and the Canaanites. They haven't left, have they? All right? They didn't pack up and they didn't move, and they are close, because God says they dwell in the valley. Just right over that next hill, right? Now, when I read that, I had to ponder here. Do you think God had meant these people to be the first victory of the children of Israel? Very possible, right? They would defeat them on their way into the land of promise. And I mean, that would have been very encouraging at the time, right? To have a victory and to move on. But God tells them to turn, right? You turn and you go back into the direction that you come from. You start heading towards the Red Sea, not to that land of Canaan. Verses 26 to 29. Y'all still with me? 26 to 29. And the Lord spake unto Moses and to Aaron, saying, How long shall I bear with this evil congregation, which murmur against me? I have heard the murmurings of the children of Israel, which they murmur against me. Saying to them, As surely as I live, saith the Lord, as ye have spoken in my ears, so will I do to you. Your carcasses shall fall in the wilderness, and all that were numbered of you, according to your whole number, from 20 years old and upward, which have murmured against me. God speaking to Moses and Aaron there. And you know, he's making it into a question there. He says, How long should I bear with this evil congregation which murmur against me? And then he says, As truly as I live. We believe God lives, right? We serve a risen Savior, right? As truly as I live, as ye have spoken in my ears, so will I do unto you. God's talking about the children of Israel. In other words, haven't the people said from time to time it would better have been for them just to die in the desert? Now, preacher says this all the time. You might have heard this before, but you got to be careful with what you ask for, right? Because you just might get it. Now, God says, this is what you told me, so this is what I will do. He says, your carcasses, right, your bodies, your dead bodies, right, will fall in the wilderness all 20 years old and upward. And God spoke of this to Aaron and Moses, right? God has told them of what he will do to these children of Israel. Well, what did Moses do? Did Moses fall to his face there on the ground and beseech the Lord and once again and show them, ask for the mercy, right, that it had been done before? He didn't do that, did he? Moses didn't do it, neither did Aaron, right? Now, Moses, he either understood that it would have done him no good to plead for the children of Israel, right? I mean, once the mind's made up, no going back, right? I think also Moses is now siding with God. That these people are unworthy of receiving of what God has promised. They pretty well showed that, right? Now let's ponder for a minute. We ponder a lot in here, Jimmy, okay? Okay. All right. Now God said, according to the whole number from 20 years old and upward, they were to die in the wilderness, right? Now we know from Numbers there in chapter 1 and verse 45, at the numbering of the children of Israel from 20 years old and upward, all that were able to go forth into war, that they were numbered at the 603,555, right? Now I take this to be all the men, from 20 to 50 years old. So in the whole number of those over the 20 years old of the men, this would be a much greater number, counting the whole population, right? Also must be added to the women that were over 20 at this time, right? So just doubling it, all right, if that's all we would do, which I would think it would be even greater than that, all right, that gives us, with just the men and the women, of 1,207,100 people that were to die. Look at verses 30 and 31. Doubtless, ye shall not come into the land concerning which I swear unto you to make you dwell therein, save Caleb the son of Jephunneh and Joshua the son of Nun. But your little ones, which ye say should be a prey, them will I bring in, and they shall know the land which ye have despised. So the whole number there of the children of Israel, from 20 years old and up, God swears to them that they will not live there. Only Caleb and Joshua, out of this whole generation, will enter into that promised land. Just only their children. Now for their little ones, them now, boy, wouldn't you hate if you just had a birthday and turned 20 years old? That'd be a bad day for you, right? Them now 19 years and younger, right? The people in their murmurings, they have expressed a concern of them, right? You know, remember when they would be murmuring and everything, and they'd state about their children? In other words, if they were killed by those people there in the land of Canaan, then their children, they would be taken as a prey, right? And they would be taken as the spoils of battle. But God now says that this is not going to be so, that He's going to provide them, that He's going to lead them into the land that He had promised to all the adults. In other words, God is still keeping His promise as He had made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. All right? It was of these people, it just wouldn't be these people that He would fulfill His promise in. Look at verses 32 and 35. But as for you, that's always bad when somebody says that. But as for you, your carcasses, all right, they shall fall in the wilderness, and your children shall wander in the wilderness 40 years, all right, and bear your whoredom until your carcasses be wasted in the wilderness. After the number of the days in which you have searched the land, even 40 days for each year, for each day for a year shall you bear your iniquities, even 40 years, and you shall know my breach of promise. I, the Lord, have said, and I will surely do it until all the evil congregation that are gathered together against me in this wilderness shall be consumed, and there they shall die. Now, God has said, right? If God has said, then God has commanded, so God is going to cause it to happen. These people failed to follow their God. They failed to believe in trusting in their God. They refused to depend on Him, rest in His protection. When the going got just a little tough, they were ready to quit. They were ready to give in. They were ready to give up. They said it'd be better off if they just die, right? Now God tells them, this is what you wanted, so this is what you're going to get. For 40 days, those spies had gone out and through the land, they come back with that evil report besides the two. So for 40 days, they are going to, for 40 years, all these people 20 years and older. You know, if you just turned 20 years old, you know you only got 40 years to live, right? I mean, that's all they know. They know they're not going to make it, but maybe to 60. Now, with 1,207,000 people, all to die in that next year, which the number would have been greater, right? You know, that's 30,177.5 deaths in 1 year. That's 2,514.8 deaths in 1 month. And that's 83.8 deaths in 1 day. I mean, they're going to have a burial team busy all the time, digging graves and putting people in it, right? For the next 40 years. These people will know about pain. They will know about the grief and the suffering that they've caused on themselves. And they have no hope now, do they? No earnest expectation of what is to come, except you're going to die. They have nothing to look forward to. Only their deaths in the wilderness, right? Now God said that He would bring them from Egypt into the land of promise, didn't he? But now he says the people, they are the ones that wouldn't allow him to fulfill his promise, right? And God tells them they will know his breach of his promise. They will be consumed there in the wilderness just because they wouldn't follow their God. So what are the children of Israel to do next, right? We'll find out in our next lesson, all right? Huh? Brother Biggerstaff? Thank you, sir. Amen.